Good afternoon. My name is Linda. I am Audrey and Axel's youngest daughter. On behalf of my sisters, Annette, Denise, and Karen, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all that have come here from near and far to help us celebrate the lives that were our mom and dad, Audrey and Axel Ostrom. We also cannot begin to express our gratitude to those of you who graciously accepted our request to say something today about Mom, Dad, or the two as a couple. I now would like to invite my eldest sister, Annette, to say a few words.
The values that my mother and father held most dearly, and the stories that you will tell, and the stories that are shown in the pictures, in the written literature, in the pictures that Mom has gathered over the years, will show these values. Dad had fairness and equity, very strong feelings of the worth of hard work and self-sufficiency. He was creative and innovative in his problem solving. He always had a solution. And he also really loved his family. He was not a very huggy person at all, but he showed his devotion to his family by being a good provider. And even when his memory wasn't so good, he insisted that if one daughter got something of value, whether it was money or, in our case, we bought the truck, but because we didn't want to pay out tax, it was labeled as a gift. And he went, oh, okay, well, how much is that? And we'll just make sure that everyone gets the same value. He didn't understand a bit about his gift, but it's not really a gift for paying for it. Mom, the words that describe her and her values is loving, caring, creative, loyal, playful, generous, affectionate, and gentle. She didn't like disciplining us, and whenever we were really small, like 5 and under, her efforts at correcting us often ended up with a grand race going around the house, her pretending not to catch us, and then when she did catch us, we'd fall on the floor or grass, laughing and giggling, and totally forget what it was the problem was. She was a mother that anybody would want as a mother. And I remember she's taught a class in babysitting to some high school students. I was going to high school, but I wasn't in my class. And after the last class, it was a series of class, one of the girls came up to her and told her, I wish you were my mother. So Mom told me the story, and she was very honored and surprised that someone would do that and say that to her. But my thought was, of course, she's a wonderful mother. Who wouldn't want her as their mother?
As the youngest sister of 4 girls, I realize the significance of the next 2 speakers. I would firstly like to introduce my mom's baby sister, Carol Smith.
raising 6 girls on a dairy farm with no boys. He still made sure the girls learned how to drive horses and later tractors, not to mention other chores around the farm. With 2 years between us, and by the time I came along, Audrey had left home. It wasn't until my mid-teens when Mom and Dad sent me out to Sidney to help Audrey and the girls during the summer. And that was when we started to connect. Since the house was close to the ocean, I'm sure the girls remember the Pat Bay Highway house, the girls and I would walk to the beach, explore while Audrey took a break. I remember laundry baskets full of girls' clothes, girls' dresses to be exact, all needing to be ironed. You can imagine how many dresses there was with 4 girls. I became very skilled at the art of ironing. Annette, Denise, and I would slip out and pick blackberries in the front yard so we could have them with ice cream that night. While enjoying my dessert one night, I noticed something chewy in my mouth. Ever chew on an earwig? Then you can relate. Audrey and the girls howled with laughter as I spitted and sputtered. Needless to say, I was very cautious next time when it came to blackberries. My journeys to the coast in the summer continued until Linda and Karen were old enough to travel by car, and they all headed east, where our parents had retired. They had headed to Fernie, to be exact. Audrey and I would pick raspberries for Mom, and of course, talk. We had some pretty intense conversations, probably about boys, relationships, and life in general. Audrey was like a hip mom to me. As she always respected my thoughts and opinions, I remember one time her comment to me was, "Carol, you are very wise for your age." I was so surprised and honored by this comment from my older sister. In 2002, I moved to the island to be closer to my sisters, Audrey and Marilyn. This is when the bonds of sisterhood really grew. To me, Audrey was a trailblazer. True to being firstborn, she was the first to leave home, first to move out west, the first to get a computer. In true Audrey style, she took a course on how to use a computer. Nothing stopped her from learning, and it was amazing how she combined her love of photography and the skill of the computer. Us 3 sisters would celebrate our birthdays by having lunch at a restaurant at the Birthday Girl's Choice. Of course, Audrey took lots of pictures, and soon after, Marilyn and I were presented with a mini album of the memories she had captured that day. I stayed with Audrey and Axel for a time, waiting for knee surgery. While there, I was introduced to the Knowledge Network. Yeah, it rings a bell, right? Every Saturday night was British murder mysteries. Audrey and Axel loved the station, as well as a glass of wine at dinner. Here's a good time to say that we sisters came from a long line of teetotalers. So if Audrey did it, I could too. My daughter remembers Audrey showing her the proper way to make a bed by tucking in the corners, all thanks to her nurse's training. Our mother had many little sayings like once burned, twice shy. Well, Audrey had her own. Marilyn would mention how she hated walking in the rain. Audrey's comment to her was, "You know you won't melt." Another one Audrey would say was, "Do what you can and don't do what you can't." More memories down here. I quickly learned that ice cream was a staple in Audrey's life. One time I surprised her with a blizzard from Dairy Queen. Her face lit up. Another time I brought her a flavored coffee from Starbucks. Wow, she sure enjoyed that. I tried to visit Audrey and Axel as often as I could, sometimes outside, especially during COVID. I remember when in-person visits weren't allowed, I stood outside her window, phone in hand, and I called her and we talked. So sis, here's to you. Our memories, our talks, our shopping, our laughs, our tears, and our love. We miss you, Audrey. I'm not sure if I mentioned this or not. Did I tell you about our shopping sprees? Did I? Okay. We would make weekly shopping sprees as well as grocery shopping. And I can remember assisting her in the change rooms and the laughters while we were trying on clothes. I can't imagine what the other customers thought. Anyway, that was so many memories. Thank you.
I would now like to introduce you to my dad's baby sister, Nikkel. Someone I know who always has a good story to share.
Thank the family for having us together and having this memory shared between Audrey and Axel. That's really very good of you. I guess I should maybe tell you a little bit about my Anderson family. Audrey and Axel met at Bella Bella, and I met Audrey actually before my brother met her, and nursing in the hospital. And I can remember, just some of the incidents where we all went on a boat across the channel and went to dances and just had a ball, just the group of us. And I remember how thrilled my parents were when their engagement was announced. They were over the moon because they liked Audrey and they're very happy for my brother. Anyway, I think of my brother as someone who is very caring, very generous, and a big tease.
And I'll tell you about the teasing bit. I'm left-handed, and I had 3 older brothers. And if we were at the table having meals or anything, and somebody wanted something off the table, I would want to pass it to them, and they said, "Oh no, not you. You've got left-handed germs." And they teased me all the time about left-handed germs. So this one day, I'd had enough. So my mom said, "Would you call the boys to come for dinner or for lunch?" And I said, "Okay." So I went to their plates and I licked them. And I licked every plate, and Mom said, "You go and wash them." And I said, "No." So they came for lunch, and you know what? They weren't teasing me, and they weren't doing anything, and anyway, I had to bait them. That's what my mom said. You baited them after a while, and finally they said, "I don't want to touch it. It's got your left-handed germs." And I stood up there and I said, "Have you finished yet?" "Well, you've got my germs, and you've got my germs, and you've got my germs, because I licked your plate." And my mom and dad could hardly contain themselves. They laughed so hard. Anyway, enough of that. It was just something. But did you know that my brother was destined to be a fisherman? When he was very little, my dad had him down on the float, and at the end of the float was an outhouse. Okay? So what's that got to do with my brother? Well, he liked to fish. So Dad put a line down the hole, tied it for safety reasons, and put a flasher on a hook and they threw it over, and Dad went on his business because Axel would be quite safe where he was at. And all of a sudden, Axel's going, "Daddy, Daddy, salad on the sook! Daddy, Daddy, salad on the sook!" And of course, he missed, apparently, so it's a halibut on the hook. So anyway, the dad came running because it's not really safe for children to be pulling them up. Anyway, went there, and sure enough, there was this halibut. I looked down there, the hole, there was a halibut. So Dad let the line down, tied it, got a very long gaff hook, and had to go to the outside on the logs and pull the thing in. Now, years ago, they didn't take pictures of everything, and that would have been absolutely wonderful, I think, to have this picture of the salivate that came through the outhouse hole. Oh, I tell you. Anyway, Axel was, I don't know whether Audrey got into a lot of this or not, but when Axel was young, he loved to dance. And there was a float house near Racy Tacker's. The family's name was Basloffs, and they had a huge float house with a room probably in that area over there and a jukebox. And my brothers used to love to go there and dance. There was quite a few people. Anyway, there's, all that was just sort of some of the things that would go on. And my brother was always so nice to me. Just really, really, really nice. I've just never had, I don't remember a negative thing about it. Never ever mean to me. I know there's 10 years between us, but it was nice. It was a wonderful life. I want to tell you that my brother gave me a gift. He came home from school in Vancouver. I think that's where he happened. So I was about 4 years old, and he came home with a gift for me, and it was a teddy bear. I forgot to bring it up. It's in that bag down there. So if you think about it, this teddy bear is 80 years old. So he's been well loved. He's in excellent condition. I mean, I really played with him. He had dog clothes on. He went in the dog buggy. He did, all sorts of things. So he was very nice. He had his eyes removed on purpose because years ago they used to poke him in with a barb type of backing, which is very dangerous for children, right? So he had his eyes removed and we never really did anything about it. He also had a squeaker in his tail. Now, there's a story about that. I was 4 years old, and I walked all around the house all the time, squeaking my tail. So, anyway, one evening, my brothers had their friends in to play coconut. Do you know that game? Coconut, and they would have some card games and Chinese checkers and whatnot. And my mom would make, a cake for them and whatever. It wasn't celebrating anything. And I was a young girl, I just went to bed, right? Next morning, I got up. Where's my bear? I found my bear. Well, I just went to squeeze the tail. It's hard. Do you know what was in it? They removed it and put 2 walnuts in it. So, because I'm trying to downsize, or I am downsizing, I'm going to pass my bear on to the last grandchild that arrived in this world before Axel passed away. And it's your friends. Okay? So, goodbye.
Does the bear have a name?
He's just bear.
He's just there.
Moments faith was special for her, especially singing in the senior choir here at St. Paul's, where she made many friends. One such friend was this next speaker, my junior choir leader, Hazel Phillips.
Hello, everybody. My first memory of Audrey was sitting in the old church, where the parking lot is now, and she would be at the back of the church on Sunday morning with babies in tow. Never a peep out of these babies. But she always sat at the back because she was afraid that maybe they might upset somebody, but no problem. So that was about 1958. Audrey said they came here in 1958, around there. So with 4 children in tow, she was obviously involved in the Sunday school as well. United Church Women. Audrey baked. She served at teas. She baked. She served at dinners. She baked. She made crafts and food for bazaars, and she baked. She helped with fundraisers such as bake sales. A very creative person. Audrey also was very involved in the leadership in this congregation. She was on the board of stewards. She actually became a member of the council in around the 2000s. She certainly was at the center of things at that time. Of course, all the time she was in the senior choir, and that was such a special part of her life. And then, while I was directing the junior choir with all 4 girls involved, Audrey was a great supporter of that process. And then when I moved on, she took my place. She also was involved in the church orchestra. Did you know we have an orchestra? And there's actually a picture just in the secondary entrance here of the orchestra, and Audrey's there with her violin. My last memory of Audrey was when Carol, or her best friend Audrey Ash, would bring her for tea or coffee during the COVID times. We had coffee on the front porch here because we weren't meeting in the sanctuary at that time. And she came along to enjoy her family and friends here, her church family, of course. Audrey was an integral part of this congregation. I really like to think that St. Paul's was an integral part of her life.
When it comes to telling a few good fishing stories about Dad, the first person I thought of was our cousin, Alan Hoskins. Alan fished with Dad many years ago and understands so well the life of a fisherman. Alan.
So Uncle Axel, he fished for a living all his life. I guess you know how it got started from May's story.
Yeah.
Well, the thing, when you're this big and you catch a halibut, I hadn't heard that story before, but it's a pretty good image. I like it. Anyway, so a large part of his fishing career was running his favorite boat, the Karen Ostrom, that he had built in the winter of 62, 63. He collaborated with the Vancouver naval architect, Robert Allen Sr., to design and draw up a 50-foot boat with a similar hull to the 36-foot boat Leonard Island that he'd had before that. It was such a wonderful sea boat that he just wanted to somehow translate that into a 50-foot hull. And it came up. It was a pretty good job, really good job. He had cut down a couple of yellow cedar trees near Bella somewhere, I forget where, and he towed them down to Vancouver to get sawn up into big long timbers, and then they were air dried and aged for a few years before he got Mansion Shipyard down in Coal Harbor to start building the boat, which that was in '62. So he became a part of it, like an unofficial part of the shipyard crew. He worked on the boat just alongside everybody else, giving advice, of course. And he often worked late into the night after everybody else was gone. You know, just like everything else in his life, he was committed to 100% to everything that he did. He never did anything half-assed. Anyway, so after the boat was launched in '63, I also spent some weeks at the dock, finishing her up and rigging her for the trolling and all that. And the salmon season in those years was way up in the Gulf of Alaska. I think it's 800 miles from Vancouver. That's where they started, and I guess he made a pretty good job of getting the boat ready, because that very first trip, they landed over 20,000 pounds of spring salmon, just in one 10-day trip. And he told me later that good trip, it paid off, pretty much paid off the mortgage on the boat. So, good going.
So around 1965, Axel and my dad, they spent a good part of that winter installing a freezer system in the Karen Ostrom. And at that time, that was considered to be kind of a controversial or maybe a cutting edge thing to do, because most people didn't believe that there'd be a market for frozen at sea salmon. But actually, he figured out otherwise, and he convinced the buyers at the Prince Rupert Fishermen's Co-op, which is where he fished for most of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he convinced the buyers there to establish a market for his fish, and that turned out to be pretty successful. And it didn't take long. Pretty soon there started to be ice trollers converted to freezers all over the coast, because it was obvious. It was a way more relaxed and efficient way to fish, because you could stay out fishing for as long as you wanted. You know, even if it blew up a bit of weather, you didn't have to run and deliver your 8 days fish and fight the weather and all that crap. And you could stay out anyway. You stay out without having to run back every 10 days or so to unload and get fresh ice and grub. And like Axel said, you could have ice cream and fudgicles whenever you want it. Ice cream's a big part of the deal, eh? So another fishing story is from 1967 when I found Axel unloading some frozen tuna at the Fisherman's Co-op in Vancouver. They had a plant in Vancouver down not far from the Second Narrows Bridge. I guess I had been driving across the bridge and I looked down, looking at the boats, and I recognized the Karen. So I better go have a visit. And I found out that he'd been fishing alone on the boat, about 200 miles offshore of the Columbia River, way out there, eh? And just on by himself on the boat. I don't know why. I didn't normally do that, eh? But anyway, he was. And he got into some pretty good bites out there. And he was catching more than he could handle by himself, or handle properly and efficiently anyway. And so the fish were kind of piled up on the hold, in the freezer hold, with some of them, the last day or two's worth of frozen to a great big lump. And he ended up with about 17,000 pounds, and he was having a heck of a time sorting, getting them apart so he could, get them off the boat that day. And he suggested I just go to the junkyard and get a couple of leaf springs. At first I thought he meant, just go out in the parking lot, get a couple of leaf springs. No, you go to the junkyard. Anyway, so I did. I got a couple of leaf springs to use as pry bars, and that worked pretty good, prying the fish apart. So we could get them unloaded, and we managed to get that done before dark. And actually, he was pretty happy about that. So he took me out for dinner, and then he offered me a job on the next tuna trip out there. And that was getting into fall, mid-September, something like that. So anyway, we left from Sidney a few days later with Axel's friend Walt, which I don't remember much of him, but anyway. And we had boxes and boxes of fresh baking and ready-to-eat meals. I think, like Helen said earlier on there, Audrey liked to bake. Oh yeah, there was cookies and there was tarts and there was bread and rolls and pies and it was great. And we had all that stuff down in the freezer hold, and as Axel told me some years earlier, there was lots of ice cream too. Yeah, so that was a good deal. And so we ate like kings out there with. There was stews and all kinds of things that was ready to heat up and go. So as an 18-year-old, I was pretty impressed with life on a freezer boat. It was great. My first experience on a freezer boat. And we got into the fish and we smashed around out there in heavy weather, and it was not pleasant weather, but in a 50-foot boat, it handled it real nice, eh? And we were, again, a couple hundred miles offshore, and we plugged the boat in about 2 weeks. 14 days of fishing, we had over 40,000 pounds of tuna. Plugged it right up to the hatch combing, eh? So when we got back to Vancouver, it was a pretty good payday. They didn't pay very much. It was like, I don't know what the heck, 8 or 9 cents a pound for tuna back in those. But anyway, it was a pretty good payday. Now, one thing that was a little bit quirky was, or more than a little bit quirky, was his tea drinking routine. He'd put a tea bag in one of those big, heavy porcelain mugs with the green stripes. They're real solid mugs, eh? Then you fill it up with boiling water from the kettle, and then after a while, a few minutes, you'd fish the tea bag out and then squish it hard with a spoon. You get every last bit of tea extract out of that bag. I think it was red rose. You had to have red rose tea, I think it was. And so once the bag was squished out properly and the tea was some kind of thick, he'd put the tea bag on the windowsill to dry out. And he was going to use it again another time. And then nobody was, neither me nor Walt, we weren't allowed to throw those tea bags out because they were being saved. So sometimes there'd be 4 or 5 of them lined up on the windowsill, and it just dried. And then until one day they all disappeared, and then you start over again with a fresh tea bag and start another collection. So that was a pretty memorable trip. It was great. Yeah, actually, he always was kind of a human powerhouse, eh? Just like Superman for his size, eh? His friend Leo Carter, he told me that when they went on hunting trips with a bunch of the guys, Axel would be the first one up in the morning. He wouldn't mess around. He'd just grab his rifle and just kind of take off like a rocket. Up, he's gone. And nobody could keep up with him going uphill. He just stomped right through like a bear or something. So he'd just disappear out of sight long before sunrise, and then maybe an hour or so, maybe a couple hours, there'd be a shot, kaboom, and that was it. And then another hour, maybe 2 hours later, actually he'd appear right back at camp with half a deer on his back, and then announce, "Well, let's go grab the rest of that deer and then have some breakfast." Get the day started. Later on in life, I used to drop in on Axel and Audrey for lunch and a BS session. They made the best of their retirement. They got around the coast in the boat that Axel built, and they were such gracious hosts that I usually ate more than I should have, and I ended up with a full belly for sure every time. And then just about every time when I was about to leave and step out the door, Actually, he'd always grab my right hand, and then we'd have kind of an arm wrestle thing, just a stand-up arm wrestle thing, and he always won. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, the last time we got together was about a week before he died, and although his memory was getting pretty shot, and he didn't seem to recognize me until it was nearly time for me to leave. He kind of lit up, and he thanked me. He says, "Thanks for the good bullshit lesson." And then when we shook hands again for goodbyes, he did the arm wrestle thing again, and he won again. So that's how I'm always going to remember him. Always a winner.
When Myrtle arrived from Nova Scotia as an RN at the hospital in Bella Bella,
she and Mom became more than just friends. They became family. Unfortunately, Myrtle is unable to join us today, but has sent some memories that our sister Denise will read on her behalf.
This is from Myrtle. These are some of my thoughts about Audrey and our time together in Bella Bella and later years. We met and married first cousins who were seamen, so we bonded even more when raising our children. One calm afternoon, Audrey and I were rowing the hospital skiff from the village side of Llama Pass to the BC Packers store about a mile away. Suddenly, we were aware of a pod of killer whales coming on our starboard. No one called them orcas 60 years ago. We did not know what to expect, she from Alberta and me the East Coaster. So we ceased rowing and sat very quietly and still in our seats. The pod proceeded to swim around us. It was a surreal few minutes that I will never forget. It had to be the longest breath holding of our lives. We learned to be self-sufficient for many weeks at a time. She in Sidney and I in Prince Rupert. Those were the days before emails and Facebook. We managed to meet as total families for visits about every 2 to 3 years. I think my son was overwhelmed by all those female cousins and the chatter that they could sometimes create. 2 more lovely experiences I recall. There was the time we were loading Axel's station wagon with 6 kids and 4 adults for a day at Jordan River. On the way home to Sidney, we stopped at a farm market where my 2 kids had the new experience of eating green peas still in their pods. Another time, many years later, Len, Axel, Audrey, and I had a wonderful trip to Hawaii. Audrey and I waited for them to pick us up at the airport with a rented car. Axel and Len drove up in a huge limousine of a car. Audrey and I felt like royalty. Kilauea volcano erupted on the big island while we were on the Waikiki. So nothing doing, we had to fly over so the guys could do a tour of the crater. We all enjoyed a lunch on a black sand beach. A still smoking volcano, not so much. Audrey and I were sisters in every sense of the word. I will miss her forever, but I know she is happy making music wherever she is now. Hugs to all you girls. Visit me when you can. A cup of tea will always be at the ready. Love you all, Myrtle.
Before we close with the final eulogy from our sister Karen, I want to thank all of those who have spoken here today. I can see our mom laughing and crying, and I can hear Dad saying, "That was a great party."
When I think of my parents' journey together, it's impossible not to think of the sea, in all its magnificence, in all its challenges, and how it shaped their lives and the lives of my sisters and me. There was nothing my dad loved more than being on the water and fishing. It was not just his livelihood, it was his lifeline, his salvation. For my mom, having come from a family of farmers, adjusting to a maritime life was a difficult transition. She persevered through love and faith and came to understand that this was not just a marriage to a man, but a marriage into a way of life. That way of life meant every spring my mom had to prepare for my dad's departure, not knowing how often she might see him during the spring and summer months, if at all, or if the next time would be in the fall when the season was over. My mom did not speak of her fears, but instead channeled them into the lengthy preparations, shopping, baking, the endless sewing to prepare for clothes, before finally saying goodbye. Farewells that took the whole family to the dock. I can hear my dad starting up the engine and the smell of creosote from the pilings mixed with the salt and diesel that was ever present. I can still feel the gentle vibration of the boat idling at the dock, My dad clean shaven and my mom anticipating her goodbye, hug and kiss. Once the boat was untied, there was the slow and gentle maneuvering away from the dock, the final waves goodbye, and then all that we could see was the tops of the poles as we left the harbor. That way of life meant every fall, my mom would prepare for my dad's return home. I remember her giddy anticipation when she would get word he was on his way. A spirited and tingling energy would suddenly take over. In the early days, it was a call from a payphone in Vancouver while he was unloading. And then later, after they set up a radio at home, via shortwave. Occasionally, however, he would surprise us and just show up, sneaking into the house quietly for dramatic effect. My sisters and I spent our summers with my mom. In June, we picked strawberries at Haskins Farm, where we were greeted by a very animated and overly affectionate strawberry farmer. We took turns cutting the grass and helped pick vegetables from the garden, but mostly we spent our summers playing. We made glamorous floats for our dolls on our wagon. We fished for bullheads for our cat Bootsy on the Gord's dock next door. I swear that I spent more time lying face down on the dock, peering into the water, looking for bullheads, than I did anything else, as was evidenced by the perpetual sunburn on the back of my legs. We took my mom's dog, Judy, for rides on the back of the bikes. When the evenings were perfectly still, we played badminton until it was so dark we could barely see the birdie. On the hottest nights, we slept on the sun deck, staring for hours at the sky, watching for shooting stars in the hopes of making a wish. Through it all, along with the bloody scrapes, the fish hooks caught in fingers, the sunburns, the bee stings, the sprained ankles, the mystery rashes, the allergic reactions taking one of us to emergency, was Mom. She was always there. But my dad's summer were a complete mystery to me, to all of us, until one day I decided I wanted to know what it was like. I was 16 the first time I was on the other side of those waves goodbye, when both Denise and I cast off for the fishing grounds on the Karen Ostrom. It was a very cold and wet experience, with long and slow days. So I honestly don't know why I wanted to go again. But after I graduated from high school and for another 5 years, I spent my summers fishing the North Coast with my dad. It must be the blood. I have so many memories from those years. Memories of a unique community that was formed during the fishing season, the family I met for the first time, the incredible wildlife, the endless rain, the glorious and lingering sunsets, and on it goes. But some of the more dramatic memories bring pause, and ones I've reflected on as being the intrinsic element in the relationship between my mother and my father. During any fishing season, there are storms. Some of them of little consequence, but some containing the wrath of 1,000 gods and the humbling realization that we are barely a speck on the surface of the ocean. My inexperience and lack of reference left me with a heightened sense of drama during those times. It was only my father's calm and measured demeanor that gave me the sense of peace I needed amidst the looming danger. Later, I understood that it was the trust built over the many years of watching, observing, seeing him come home every fall that calmed me. And it was this trust that my mom had in my dad that was built upon every year when he came home. Not from the fishing, but from the storms. That trust became the glue that bound them together, that when my father finally set off on his final trip, never to come home again, my mom knew she was to go with him. My dad untied his boat for the last time on November 4th, 2021. 12 days later, on November 16th, my mom joined him the only way she knew how, in trust. My parents were brought together by the sea, and the sea remained their loyal companion, bearing witness to every tear of joy and sadness that comprises a long life, together well lived.